BBC News article online, 27th of August 2021. Certificate of Vaccine Identification Origin. US spy agencies publish inconclusive report. Well, first off, the origin of COVID certificate of vaccine identification started as a concept in the mind of man or woman. Certificate of vaccine identification is the digitalization of all your medical records, vaccination records, on a digital identification, microchip, whatever, in order to demonstrate before you can go anywhere, travel the world. Soon it'll be interstate or inter-country or inter-town or inter-city or inter-village, and without which you, unless you can prove you've been jabbed like the dogs or microchipped like the dogs, you will not be able to travel. Technology will advance to the point whereby if you do attempt to leave the zone, the radius, if you're not vaccinated, from where you have been told to stay within, then you will be turned off or zapped or of some sort, and it will be a criminal offence. Okay, so that's the origins of COVID, but what we're really talking about here is the origins of SARS-CoV-2. Now, it's the US spy agencies. Now, you would have thought, considering the big push that's gone on, because they've been claiming came from a meat market in Wuhan, didn't come from the laboratory, wasn't a leak, and anybody proclaiming it came from a lab was turned into a conspiracy theorists. Okay, even by the World Health Organization, the health arm of the United Nations, the very United Nations. Yes, people, that President George W. Bush Sr. stated would be used to bring in the New World Order or the Great Reset. And it's happening, folks. He said that in 1990. Take a listen.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN standards. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN standards.
Yes, there it was. It's not just me saying that. George W. Bush, President. And they're using, as I state, the United Nations. We've got the World Economic Forum bringing in the Great Reset. That's another arm of the United Nations. Many arms of the United Nations. Its tentacles are reaching out to bring in the New World Order, relabeled the Great Reset. The dawn of a new paradigm on the UK government website. Ministry of Defence document, go and check it out. Okay, the US intelligence community has been unable to determine the origins of certificates of vaccine identification 19 and is split on whether it leaked from a lab or developed in nature, according to a new report. So why is not the US intelligence now labelled conspiracy theorists, or at least half of those, or however percentage of those that are saying actually it came from a lab, it leaked from a lab in Wuhan? Oh dear. Experts warn that time is running out to gather evidence of its beginnings. Yes, folks, you see, put it on the back burner. Throw it in the bushes, throw it into that other field, and eventually it'll just fizzle away and we'll claim we can't actually decide the origins. Okay, because the trail will wear thin. It will go cold. China's foreign minister has dismissed the report as anti-science. The report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said the intelligence community remains divided on COVID's most likely origin. All agencies assessed that two hypotheses are plausible: natural exposure to an infected animal and a laboratory-associated incident. Okay, folks, I'm going to read something now. This is taken from The Truth About COVID-19, written by Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronnie Cummins. And this is talking about an excerpt from the book, which I will read verbatim. The collapse of the bat in the market origin story. This can be found on page 21, chapter 2, Lab Leak or Natural Origin by Ronnie Cummins. For months after the onset of the epidemic, the mass media basically ignored a number of scientific and media reports that no animals at the Wuhan market had tested positive for COVID-19, and that approximately 1/3 of the initial group of reported human COVID-19 cases in Wuhan from early December 2019 had no connection to the seafood market whatsoever, including the first reported case. Now, I must add, these are sourced, and if I get the time, I'll get the sources, I'll scan the sources, it'll be a lot easier, and I will put them up here somewhere so you can actually look at them and check them out. The media also largely ignored the testimony of numerous people from the Huanan seafood market who categorically stated that there were no bats for sale and non-eating in the market. Get that, folks? People who worked there stated no bats for sale in this market, never eaten from this market. In fact, the nearest bat caves to the Wuhan market, 600 miles away. And when SARS-CoV-2 emerged in Wuhan, these wild bats were in, guess what, folks? Sleepy hibernation. So, no bats eaten in the market. Testimony from people who work in the market. Bats 600 miles away in caves, hibernating. Amazing. In January 2020, a Beijing newspaper had reported that patient 0, the first victim of the COVID-19 virus, was in fact Huang Langling, a scientist at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yes, folks, the first patient. Hang Yanling, a scientist at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and although this report has since been removed from the internet, the rumours persist. In February, well-respected Chinese scientists Bo Tao Xia and Lia Xia pointed out in a pre-publication scientific article quickly suppressed and removed from the internet by the Chinese government. According to municipal report and the testimonies of 31 residents and 28 visitors, the bat was never a food source in the city and no bat was traded in the market. This is testimonies, folks. 31 residents and 28 visitors. Linked again in the scan I've got there. Although there were apparently no wild bats for sale or consumed in the market, there were many bats and bat viruses being stored and experimented on in 2 supposedly high security research labs nearby. You can guess which one of those had the bats in. One of these, the Chinese Centre for Disease Control, is just 300 yards away from the Han seafood market and adjacent to Union Hospital, where several early cases of COVID-19 infected hospital doctors were reported. Another, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, is 7 miles away. The conclusion of Boteos here and Leos here, suppressed by the Chinese government, was that the killer coronavirus probably originated from a laboratory in Wuhan. Both of the Wuhan labs were known to be collecting, analysing and experimenting on hundreds of live bat viruses. There you go, folks. The bats were in the laboratories, not in the market. Dear me. At times making them more virulent and infective. Mind you, these labs are located in a city of 10 million people, a classic environment primed for quick spread of viruses. Doing gain-of-function research is unquestionably a primary threat to human existence. Why would anyone conduct this dangerous research on virulent viruses in such a densely populated area? A number of scientists who worked in these labs, most notably Dr. Zhengli, dubbed the Batwoman by the Chinese press, has published peer-reviewed articles in scientific journals, often co-authored by US and other foreign scientists, describing how they used gain-of-function techniques such as genetic engineering and lab manipulation to make coronavirus more infectious and virulent. Source 41. Later it would come out that these gain-of-function experiments were being funded and carried out not only by the Chinese government and the military, but also by the US government, including Dr. Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the Eco-Health Alliance, among others, as well as a shadowy network of Pentagon and national security agencies. Source number 42. Yes, folks, it's when we look, it's amazing what we can dig up, isn't it? And look at it now. All agencies assess that two hypotheses are plausible: natural exposure to an infected animal and a laboratory-associated incident. According to the report, several unnamed spy agents thought COVID emerged from natural exposure to an animal infected with it or a close progenitor virus, but they only had low confidence in this conclusion. One intelligence agency developed moderate confidence that the first human infection was likely due to a laboratory-associated incident, and we've just spoken about the gentleman. The Chinese gentleman worked in the laboratory, whether this is that one, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which has studied coronavirus in bats for more than a decade. See, when it starts coming out, you see, when people start spreading the truth, they've got to admit it. To cover their arses. Oh, but we did start to conclude that. Yes, we didn't ignore that. A World Health Organization team which visited Wuhan concluded early this year that the disease most likely spilled over from an animal sold at a market. Really? Which market? Considering there were no bats sold, according to eyewitness testimonies, at the market in Wuhan. They were 600 miles away, hibernating in a cave. The only bats that were around the area were in 2 laboratories, being experimented on. Gain of function in the genes. This conclusion has been rejected by some scientists. I'm surprised they're still alive. And earlier this week, the WHO panel warned that it would soon be biologically impossible to gather evidence dating back to the virus origin. How convenient, folks. How convenient. The trail has gone cold, according to them. But it hasn't, because people have got evidence. Build back better, folks. Build back better. But according to whose standards? According to whose standards?